Houston, Texas, it's David Knight.
Well, it's Monday, November the 3rd, 6th, rather, 2017. I'm David Knight. We're going to be taking a look at the tragedy yesterday and the calls for gun control, the reactions of the left or the mainstream media, the stories that they will not tell you about the heroes who shut this down, the heroes with guns. And this is the story that is now emerging of who these individuals are, how they shut this down. So we're going to have clips from that. We're also going to be talking to Mark Collins. You may know Mark Collins. He's played George Washington in many productions in the documentary Revelation that we sold here at Infowars. He goes around to schools and he tells people about real American history as George Washington. He is a spot-on doppelganger from his appearance down to his size. It's just amazing how uncannily the resemblance is. But he is also a pastor, and he was a pastor at this church for a while as a temporary pastor. He had served there. He knew the people there very well. He knew the pastor there. He knows most of the church there. And as he heard about this shooting, he went there to see what he could do to help. He's going to be giving us an update as to what's going on there, the condition of the people who were there. And we're also going to be talking to Rob Dew, who went down there yesterday to file reports from the site. We're going to have some pictures that have not been seen before, that have not been aired before. So we're going to be talking about all of those issues as we come up. It's amazing when you look at this, the death and destruction that we've had here. This is something that we've been concerned about for a while. As a matter of fact, it was a few years ago here at Infowars that I interviewed a man who wrote a book about a church that he was in South Africa. His name is Charles van Wyk, and he wrote a book. You can buy it at WND Books, and I think it was, the title of it was Shooting Back. And we talked at length about what happened in that particular incident. You know, it's not about firepower. It's about people who are simply armed and willing to defend themselves. And in his particular case, there were 4 terrorists with fully automatic weapons who started by throwing grenades into a church of about 1,500 people. They'd picked a soft target. They'd picked a target, a church that was mostly white in an area that was very liberal. They figured people would not be armed there. That's what they said after the unrest in South Africa took a temporary hiatus and had a truth and reconciliation. Of course, things have started back up now in South Africa. But they had truth and reconciliation where they gave people pardons for talking about what they had done. It was coming out. And so these individuals who had created that attack said they thought they were being shot by multiple people from different directions because of what happened. We're going to have his excerpts from that interview that I did with him. Because at the time it came out, we were talking to people and we're trying to get people to understand how soft targets are in churches and how there needs to be people who are designated by the pastor, by other individuals. They don't need to make a big show of it. They don't need to have some kind of a weapons search of people coming in. They don't need to go full TSA. They don't need to do any TSA, as a matter of fact. But they should have some individuals in your church. If you don't have that, you should talk to your pastor about that. You should have some individuals who are trained and have licenses to conceal carry. And they should be there to protect the people who are coming to worship. And they should be guard dogs, quite frankly, for the pastor, for the flock. And so we're going to air excerpts of that because this is something that people need to think about. Wherever you are, you need to think about this. There's soft targets everywhere. It's not just churches. But churches are especially soft targets, and that's why we had that interview a few years ago. So we're going to re-air parts of that as well as the interview with Mark Collins, with Rob Dew. We're also going to have interviews with Lord Monckton. He has some amazing updates on what is happening with climate. I think he has broken the false model and exposed it of climate change. He has really gotten down to the science of this. So stay with us. It's going to be an amazing program. We'll be right back. I'm David Knight.
Devin Patrick Kelly. That's his name. He got dishonorably discharged from the Air Force 3.5 years ago. He spent much of a year in the brig. But there's still conflicting reports about why he was kicked out of the military and imprisoned. But what we do know is this, according to his Facebook, according to his LinkedIn, and according to his high school and college acquaintances and friends. He was a SJW atheist who viciously hated Christians, particularly Southern Baptists. And ladies and gentlemen, on November 5th, just outside San Antonio, Texas, in Sutherland, great little town of good people, place I've traveled and ate lunch many times, he went into a church and began pumping bullets into men, women, and children, some of them as young as 2 years of age. You want to talk about vicious anti-Christian behavior. Remember what happened when Houston got flooded by the big hurricane a few months ago. Leftists across the board celebrated it and said it was an act of nature against evil Christian white conservatives. And of course, it was whites like Jennifer Lawrence that were pushing it when she wasn't down on her knees worshiping Harvey Weinstein and the rest of the scum. And we saw Charlie Hebdo, the satire publication in France, showing a bunch of flooded white people hailing Hitler in Houston. Didn't matter that Houston's 70% non-white. Didn't matter that this church was half non-white, a mixed church. Doesn't matter. They still celebrated all over Twitter, all over Facebook, and we know they celebrated. And we knew within 2 hours of this tragic event, we were on air live, myself, Paul Watson, Owen Schroyer, Rob Dew. We were all on the ground working, Travis Knight, covering the fact from Austin, but also from Sutherland, that he was an atheist SJW on his own LinkedIn page with a direct link to his Air Force record, the whole 9 yards, talking about how he was an SJW, animal rights activist, atheist, and all the rest of it. And then Newsweek, within hours, came out and said that I was a liar and claimed that we fabricated this with no evidence. Well, guess what? Today, even CBS and the Daily Mail and everybody else has the same info we have, and it's confirmed. So here's the bottom line. They said they were launching this big revolution November 4th. And Saturday, we did a special live broadcast covering it. And I said, it looks like a dud. But I said, let's not celebrate this too much because there aren't a bunch of dead cops and a bunch of buildings burning, because we've seen what SJWs have done before and Black Lives Matter has done before, and any means necessary. And I said, you look for these groups to have some lone wolves carry something out in the next few days or maybe even tonight. And ladies and gentlemen, it was completely obvious. He's wearing all black. He's dishonorably discharged, having guns illegally. He's a big atheist at SJW. And the day after, couldn't go on a Saturday, Christians are in church on Sunday. He goes in on a Sunday morning to fix his eyes on those Christians like a vicious, horrible rat that he was, like the snake he was, to then pump rounds into little kids as young as 6 and 2 years of age. I challenge anybody to go to the Daily Mail's article that's linked up on Infowars.com and look at that and look at the faces of those sweet families of white people and black people and Hispanic folks and quote, mixed families. They're all just human beings that bleed red blood. And then to think about this monstrous, demonic, horrible, evil person. And you know what? The left's always saying effing white males are the problem and effing white males are the evil and effing white males are inherently bad. The only place I see those demographics borne out and those statistics borne out is when it's SJWs and when it's the groups pushing for civil war. And absolutely, the ringleaders every single time are either effing white males, to use their terms, or effing white females. These are sickening, mentally ill people, as President Trump said this morning, who want power and who want control and see civilization turning against them and not accepting their propaganda and their garbage. So now they're panicking and they want to try to push us all into submission. But they're smart enough, like Vegas or like what we just saw in Texas, to not take credit for it openly because they want to blame the Second Amendment and even the firearm he chose at the very, very same time, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the globalists are going to push to take our Second Amendment now. But the bottom line is we have to keep our Second Amendment to defend ourselves. And all churches and all organizations that are Christian or conservative or pro-America are targets. And any place that people lovingly come together are targets for these demons. And that's why everyone needs to simply have security officers that are part of the church, that are already basically trained, that everybody trusts, that are low-key, as the ushers, as the deacons, who wait out in the foyer during the church service, ready. There's already been countless examples of shooters going into churches and only getting to kill a couple people or shoot a couple people, or sometimes nobody, because they're off-duty police officers or armed ushers. And it's almost always leftist or jihadist. We've seen in Maryland and in Tennessee the last month, jihadis attack churches and kill and shoot people and almost no coverage. This is epidemic. We saw, the car attack, the truck attack, and the media tried to say it was a truck that did it just last week, not a jihadi. I mean, this is happening constantly with the left and the jihadis that are their natural sympathizers coming after everybody. But the facts are in. He was a atheist, SJW, anti-free market, anti-Trump guy, just like the doctor that lived down the street from Rand Paul. We now learn Rand Paul has 4 to 5 broken ribs, may have punctured lungs, is in serious, serious condition. And his rich neighbor, the guy's much more wealthy than he is, it turns out, he's an inventor and a doctor, came over and attacked him, and on his own Facebook says, I hate Trump, I hate Rand Paul, I hate conservatives, I hate libertarians, I hate all the stuff that's going on in this country. I love CNN, I love Colbert, I love Saturday Night Live. Same stuff that the Sutherland guy loves. He loves CNN, he loves it all. This is their army. That they call for violence. They call for hashtag hunt Republicans. They call for get out there and go after them, and it's happening. And another mentally ill dirtbag who had a gun illegally is now going to be used to then try to take the guns and rights away from those of us who are the targets. So we're not putting up with it. We're exposing it here at Infowars.com. From the black uniform he was wearing of Antifa, to his background, to who he targeted and when he did it, everything, the date, the background, the clothing, the MO, his history, the dishonorable discharge, all of it shows another dirtbag, leftist, crazy piece of garbage that wanted Christian and conservative blood, and by God, he got it. Well, guess what? He won't use those sacrifice of those dead people to take our rights collectively. And I salute the heroes that pinned him down and shot him, the citizens that then drove him off the road. Great job. And that's the type of action we need. Texas strong. God bless you all, ladies and gentlemen. Back to David Knight and the live transmission that I'll be on today, 11 a.m. Central. But it was an Antifa globalist attack on America. And what they see is the heart of our strength, places like Texas. Infowars.com. Please spread the videos. We're in Infowar. They're trying to spin this right now, but we're not going to let them. We've got all the articles, all the videos. We've got Rob Dew and Travis Knight on the ground. They're going to be reporting later here with David Knight, and then later with me in studio today. Infowars.com, newswars.com. Please stay with us.
All right, that was Alex Jones. We're going to be talking to Rob Dew as he here in studio. He's going to give us a breakdown as to what he saw there. We've got pictures that have not been released publicly yet. We're also going to have Mark Collins. He's an individual that you've seen here on Infowars many times, dressed as George Washington. He is the spitting image of George Washington. I mean, he put his face next to George Washington as he does on his site, and he educates children about the Founding Father, but he is a pastor also. And he was a temporary pastor there at that church. He knows those people. He went there to help. He's going to give us an update as to what's going on there. We're going to take a look at the reactions of the politicians, the celebrities, of course, calling for gun control. We're going to take a look at the heroes of this event, the people who shut this down. This is a story the mainstream media is not going to tell you about as they push for gun confiscation. I'm David Knight. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm David Knight on this Monday, November 6, 2017. A very sad day after all the deaths that happened, not too far from where we are here in Austin. And as people say, our thoughts and prayers are with the victims, what does that mean? You know, we pray for those who are struggling to survive, and we pray for those who will be struggling with the psychological damage of this. A young boy whose mother and sisters were shot and killed. He was shot 4 times. He's struggling to survive. He's going to struggle with those psychological issues as if he recovers. We pray for the families of those who lost their loved ones. But then our thoughts. What are our thoughts? Our thoughts, first of all, is there anything I can do to help if we live close by? But the second thing should be, what can we do to stop this? And I think we see this on both the left and the right, don't we? Now, the left always comes up with the solution: we need to make guns just go away. Let's just wish them into a cornfield. I just wish guns never existed. Well, Whether or not that's the way you feel, that is not a practical solution. That is not a thought that is going to help, because that toothpaste is out of the tube. So like it or not, liberals, guns are here. They're here to stay. The question is, who's going to have them? Are they going to be the sole possessions of criminal lunatics or tyrannical governments? Or will we have the people armed to fight back? That's the question. And so we're going to talk today about the heroes who shot down this sick bastard, as the girlfriend of the man who chased him down, one of the heroes who chased him down, described him. And that is a good description of this guy. He is a sick bastard. We're going to take a look at him. We're going to take a look at the calls for gun control, the reactions of the press, the reactions of the Hollywood celebrities who think that they know better than we. They always call for the banning of the inanimate object. They never do apply this to an individual, do they? After we had the terror attack in New York, there's been 2 terror attacks in New York. Neither of them have involved guns, have they? At 9/11, we had the one that just happened last week. But they haven't involved guns. So now the call is to let's ban cars from cities. That's what they're saying. That is not the solution. There are things that we can do to vet people. There's things that we can do to identify people who are at risk. And there was a lot of indications that this guy was a sick bastard. And so, he should not have been able to get a gun. There's a lot of questions about how that happened. But let's talk about what we can do to make sure that we protect our own and ourselves. That's the key issue that I think we need to take away from this, that the mainstream media and the politicians are not going to tell you. So we're going to talk about the heroes in this as well. I want to get President Trump's take on this. He's traveling, of course, in Asia, and he was asked about a couple of different questions, and they asked him a 2-part question about North Korea, but then they asked him about the shooting, and here's what he had to say.
A question which is really the first part of your question. I think that mental health is your problem here. This was a very, based on preliminary reports, very deranged individual, a lot of problems over a long period of time. We have a lot of mental health problems in our country, as do other countries. But this isn't a guns situation. I mean, we could go into it, but it's a little bit soon to go into it. But fortunately, somebody else had a gun that was shooting in the opposite direction. Otherwise, it would have been as bad as it was. It would have been much worse. But this is a mental health problem at the highest level. It's a very, very sad event. These are great people and a very, very sad event. But that's the way I view it.
Okay, that was President Trump traveling in Asia. To understand the scope of this, think about the fact that small town, Sutherland Springs, has only about 400 people, maybe a little bit less. So having 26 people killed, 20 injured, I mean, you're looking at a situation where about 6% of the town was killed. About another 5% was shot. Mark Collins is going to be joining us in the next hour. Mark Collins is somebody that you may know here from Infowars. He lectures kids about George Washington. But he's also a pastor. He knows these people, and he's going to give us an update on what is going on in that community. He went there immediately as soon as he found out what was happening there. The gun was bought from Academy Sports and Outdoors, which is a large chain here in Central Texas. They have about 240 locations throughout the country. I know that they do background checks. They always run them. We've bought guns from them in the past. They run background checks. So the question is, how did this guy buy this gun? Because he was dishonorably discharged. The questions are, when you talk about being dishonorably discharged for court-martial, and as we get information about this guy, it appears that he was jailed for a year because of assaulting and beating his wife and child, and then was dishonorably discharged. And the questions are, according to military law, they say, will I be able to own firearms? Federal and state laws do place restrictions on the purchase of firearms by those convicted of felonies like this. Many jurisdictions distinguish between violent and nonviolent offenses, but he was convicted of a violent offense. So the question is, as one individual says, a dishonorable discharge can only be handed down to an enlisted member by a general court-martial for what the military considers to be the most reprehensible conduct. This type of discharge may be rendered only by conviction at a general court-martial for serious offenses, for example, desertion, sexual assault, murder, etc. things that call for dishonorable discharge as part of the sentence. All veterans' benefits are lost regardless of any past honorable service. In many states, a dishonorable discharge is deemed the equivalent of a felony conviction with attendant loss of civil rights. U.S. federal law prohibits possession of firearms by those who have been dishonorably discharged per the Gun Control Act of 1968. So how did it get through the background checks that we have? And, of course, we have liberals who are calling not necessarily for background checks. They want to ban all guns. And remember, it was just last August, 3 months ago, that in Australia, where they banned guns, they confiscated the guns, they steamrolled the guns and crushed them. We just had a drive-by shooting in Australia. They didn't talk about that. Killed an individual, multiple shots. Excuse me, but that's not talked about by the left. Now, there is a local connection. The shooter's Facebook page says that she is from Sutherland Springs. Her mother was pictured in previous photos at this particular church. So that's where his mother-in-law went. He and his wife were separated. He had a Ruger AR assault-type rifle. Now, this is always the boogeymen of the left. They always make this about firepower, don't they? The citizen who shot him, and I believe we'll find out, killed him. I think that he bled out, shot him with a shotgun. This guy shows up with one of these assault-type rifles, according to Daily Beast, the things that strike fear into the hearts of liberals. And he has body armor on. But, of course, when you look at body armor, it has plates in the front, plates in the back, and those two plates are held together with straps on the side. So the man who showed up and took him down shot him on the side where he didn't have any body armor. They then chased him. And it appears that this guy bled out after a high-speed chase, but we will get confirmation of that from law enforcement. They haven't confirmed that yet. Law enforcement was not an issue in this. They did not get involved, and this is why we have to have armed citizens. I'm going to play later in the show parts of an interview that I had with an individual in South Africa who was in a church that was attacked. Guys came in with 4 fully automatic machine guns and grenades, and he stopped them with a 5-shot .38. And you have to understand that it is not about the firepower. It's about people who are willing to stand up to these sick bastards. Stay with us. We'll be right back. I'm David Knight. Welcome back. I'm David Knight. We're going to talk to our reporter, Rob Dew, who is on the scene. He traveled down yesterday to Sutherland Springs. He is there. He's attended press conferences that are going on there. He's reporting from the scene. I want to go to Rob right now. Tell us, Rob, what you have learned down there as you're reporting.
Well, obviously the community is very small, is in shock. Behind me, over to my left, there had a candlelight vigil last night, but over my shoulder is the church, the First Baptist Church, where the shooting took place. Now, we did learn this morning that the shooter who stopped all the carnage, and apparently the original shooter, Mr. Kelly, had a hostage, but there was a man named Stephen Wilford who approached him with a shotgun, opened fire, hit him through the body armor at some point, and when they fled, they took a guy's truck. This citizen's name is Johnny Lingendorf, and so they both piled in the car and gave chase on this suspect and ran him off the road about 6 miles to the north of this location. Right now, we went to that location last night where they were towing the cars away, and to see what was going on. So there was 2 cars involved in that. They ran him off the road, and then he died, as I've been saying, like a dog in a ditch. Yeah. Evidently, he might have bled out. Reports that I've seen say that the individual who shot him, and it appears that he shot him in the side where he doesn't have any body armor, that he had a shotgun. He got shot in the side with a shotgun. I would not be surprised to see the guy bleed out. Was he, as far as you know, was he hunting people down in the church? Because the reports that I've seen, like this one young child shot multiple times, 4 times, this one young boy. Well, and that's the connection seems to be he taught Bible school for a while back in 2013. His mother-in-law went to this church. They also reported that his ex-wife / girlfriend had gone to this church. So they're not even sure if he was still married at this point. But so there is some connection to this church, because people were asking, why would he come all the way here from New Braunfels if, for no reason? It seems kind of out of the way to target this church. You wouldn't notice it if you were driving along this road, this Highway 87. You wouldn't even notice the town, much less. There's really no stoplight. There's a blinking yellow light in a post office. There's not much here. So there has to be some sort of connection. And now we see that there is a family connection to this church. And he'd also in recent years been preaching atheism to his friends. In fact, so many were taking to Facebook saying they'd stop being friends with him because of all the atheist Facebook posts. So he seems to have just a run of bad, not bad luck, but bad behavior. He got kicked out of the Air Force for assaulting his then wife and girlfriend. So,
yeah, and the child as well. So they put him in prison and then kicked him out. And I guess that, you talked about the connection there to Sutherland Springs, his wife being from there, his mother-in-law attending that church. And clearly, if he's going to beat his wife and children severely enough to be thrown into prison, then he's got an axe to grind with the family. That would explain why he was there. And I would say, too, as we look at this, he put it on his LinkedIn that he taught Vacation Bible School for a month. Anybody knows about Vacation Bible Schools? Those are typically about 4 or 5 days. You usually do that like Monday through Friday during the summer. And he was an assistant there. I mean, this is a guy who, when he talks about children and so forth after having beaten his child, I wouldn't be surprised if this guy was there trying to, as a pedophile. He certainly wasn't somebody that was a Christian. He was an adamant atheist, as you mentioned, Rob. People had blocked him on Facebook because he was so adamant about it. What do we know about his weapon? Yes. Well,
I want to get to this first, because this happened during the press conference yesterday. One of the first questions asked, and this was a man who was holding a seat for an NPR guy up at the front row. This guy's sitting there. He gets up and moves to the back at some point, and he gets in the first or second question, and you could probably hear it on my recording that we made. We did a live stream of the press conference. He yells, "Was this man known to have any affiliations with militia groups?" So he said, "Is this man known to have any affiliations with militia groups?" Like immediately it was the militia's fault. Yeah. And people kind of looked back at him like, who is this guy? And then I went up to him and confronted him afterward. I said, "Did you ask that question because he was white?" And he's sitting there tweeting, he was white, and he walked away. Total chill plan. And it's appalling that type of behavior is taking place to, we didn't even know his name at that point, which is interesting. I guess ABC News had reported his name, but at the press conference, they weren't giving out his name yet. They were still holding on that.
Yeah, well, CNN and the local congressman, I think, Vicente Gonzalez, I think he's a U.S. congressman. I'm not sure if he's U.S. or state congressman. They'd put it out as Sam Hyde, which is an internet meme. Right. We'll talk about that later. But, what they did in terms of that press conference that you're just talking about, throwing out militia. We've also seen celebrities saying Republicans, the NRA's got blood on its hands. The NRA doesn't have any blood on its hands. This individual has blood on his hands. And, it was a gun owner who stopped this. The police were nowhere around. The police didn't get there until 6 or 7 minutes after this guy died in the ditch. So that's the issue. Just like the shooter that I interviewed in South Africa. He says it's better to have a gun in your hand than a cop on the phone. They can't be everywhere to protect everybody. That's why we have to have firearms.
The Tennessee shooting, too. The Tennessee shooting, he was stopped by an usher with a gun. That guy couldn't go any further. So I think what you're going to see is the trend of which is a good trend, by the way, I think, of more ushers and people who work in the church system becoming concealed carry holders, having that ability to carry inside the church. And I think it's going to keep people safer.
Yes, absolutely. And that was one of the reasons why this man from South Africa wrote the book, was to encourage people in America. Said the day is coming when this is going to happen in America. Now, we've seen it happen a couple of times. They're very soft targets. There needs to be somebody designated to protect individuals and not do it in a confrontational way. I mean, it can be done very, very easily. So we're going to play some clips of that later. But Rob, did you learn anything about his firearms? Because the question in my mind is he's served time in jail in the military for beating his wife and his child. Then he was dishonorably discharged, which is kind of a felony type of thing. And typically under federal law and Texas law, it seems he would be barred from purchasing a rifle. And yet there are reports that he was able to purchase this rifle from Academy Sports. And I know they do background checks.
They do. And apparently I talked to a source within the government who said the version that he was court-martialed, but and I don't have it in front of me right now, but whatever he was delineated as, they call it a bucket full of chicken is what their term for it is. But that means you can still, it's not listed as a Class B felony, which I believe keeps you from getting a firearm. I'll have to look that up. I'll do a report on that, because that was interesting. How did this guy, how was he able to get a firearm if he was court-martialed? Because we were hearing on the internet that, if you're court-martialed, there's no way you can get a firearm. Maybe there
That's
is a loophole in that. Who knows? But it was a Ruger AR-15. He apparently showed it off on Facebook a couple days before this killing. Also shaved his beard on Halloween. So at some point, he had decided he was going to go through with this, and obviously there's some mental illness involved. You look at this church back here. This is small town America. This is not where you would not expect to see any type of crime here. We talked to some people last night. A guy who owns a body shop down the road says we leave our doors unlocked. This is a safe place to be, and obviously it can happen anywhere. And people need to be aware of their surroundings. They need to be aware of when people start acting different, because as we see, we've now had two of the most deadliest shootings in just this past month.
Well, when we look at this guy, and the left always likes to focus on tools. We heard after the New York City terror attack last week, that got to ban cars from cities. And they always focus on weapons. And, of course, the assault-type weapon, like an AR, is the thing that frightens them the most. And yet the guy who stopped this, the hero, used a shotgun. So maybe Joe Biden was right. Get a shotgun instead of an AR. But seriously, you cannot protect yourself from crazy people. There are people who are kidnapping individuals and murdering them using any kind of implement. The question is, when you have crazy individuals like this, can we have the tools available to protect ourselves? That's really the only issue that is involved here. All right, stay with us, Rob Dew, and we're going to be right back to him. He is in Sutherland Springs reporting on the situation there live. I'm David Knight. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm David Knight on this Monday, November the 6th, 2017. We're talking to Rob Dew, who was on location in Sutherland Springs, Texas, the site of a horrendous shooting yesterday at a church. As I mentioned before, it killed about 6% of the town's population, very small town, with 26 people being killed. Another 5% were shot and injured and fighting for their life. So this has been a horrific event for that community, not just that church. Everybody is going to be touched by that in that community. Rob Dew is there on site, and we're going to be talking to someone else who has gone there to help, somebody who was a temporary pastor there in the past. Mark Collins is going to be giving us an update as well. Before we get back to Rob, I just want to remind you of some of the sales that we have at InfoWarsStore.com. We have a sale on DNA Force, now reduced by 25%. That is a big dollar savings on DNA Force. We still have Super Male Vitality reduced 30% off, Anthroplex 50% off. And you can get Survival Shield X2 Nascent Iodine or BioTrue Selenium 40% off. You can also get 10% off Vitamin Mineral Fusion Drink Mix with the code at checkout VITA10, VITA10. That's 10% off Vitamin Mineral Fusion Drink Mix. Rob, when I'm looking at what the media is doing, they were quick to label him as a Bible school teacher. Just as you pointed out in the press conference, they had a individual holding a spot for NPR so they could go down and ask if he was a militia member. So they're very anxious to put him out there as a conservative Christian. And yet his social media, before the government shut that down and started deleting the stuff, we saw that out of people have taken some screenshots, and out of 10 groups that he liked on Facebook, 4 of the 10 were atheist-oriented. One of them was a psychic medium that he was following. The causes, as Paul Joseph Watson tweeted out, that he likes were animal welfare, arts and culture, children. Oh, yeah, he likes children. He went down the aisles shooting them multiple times. Civil rights, social action, environment, health, and human rights. Does he sound like a conservative with his environmental and social action, arts and culture stuff to you? Oh, I think we don't have any audio there. Oh, there we go. Now, start over again, Rob. We had lost audio there for a second. Go ahead. We got you now.
It sounds like a person who's consumed with what the left likes to preach. Social justice, everybody's a victim. Obviously, he felt he was so victimized enough, he wanted to take a gun. And yeah, like you mentioned, there's one kid right now, one little child, I believe he's 8 years old, shot 4 times with an AR-15 and still alive in surgery right now.
Yes, yes. Horrific. And of course, as you mentioned, many people who knew him from high school characterized him as creepy, crazy, and weird. They said they had to block him because he was such an evangelist for atheism. He wouldn't leave people alone. One individual said he was the first atheist I met. Another who went to school with him said, I was in complete shock. I just had deleted him off of Facebook because I couldn't stand his posts. Another one said, I removed him off of Facebook for the same reason. He was being super negative all the time, always preaching about atheism, always attacking Christians verbally until he began to attack them with his gun.
Yeah, a very sick individual. I think you're going to find he was probably on prescription drugs. I mean, if he believed in psychics, it just boggles the mind that somebody like that could, you watch this progression going from being in the Air Force, wanting to serve his country, but getting kicked out, and then the fall going to leading up to this church killing. I mean, totally sick individual, preaching atheism. None of his friends had all disowned him, so he had nothing left, apparently.
Let me ask you if there's been an update in terms of determining the cause of death for this guy. Have they said that he bled out from the shotgun wound to his side?
The New York Post was reporting this morning, and we were waiting for the sheriff because he was supposed to give a press conference earlier over on site here. Was that he did actually shoot himself after he crashed the car. But it was the work of those two individuals, Johnny Langendorf and Stephen Wilford, who actually, Mr. Wilford confronted the shooter with a shotgun. They gave chase. In fact, turn around, Travis, you can see the road. They went right down this way, straight north on 539, about 5-6 miles from here. And then right at the county line is where they were able to run him off the road. They said they were going upwards of 95 miles an hour during this chase.
So they're now saying that he pulled over and shot himself. You said that he had a hostage with him. Is that correct?
That is what is being reported, that he had a hostage. They didn't mention that yesterday in the briefing. But according to Mr. Langendorf's girlfriend's Facebook post, where interestingly, a citizen journalist is putting out news, she wrote her boyfriend chased the guy. He saw him die within feet of him. And they didn't mention whether he'd committed suicide, but they did mention there was a hostage there. And they did make sure before they drew their rifles on the car that the hostage was clear.
That's interesting. So, and of course, the individual that you're talking about, Langendorf, he was the one who was driving the car. He said he pulled up there. He saw these two shooting at each other. And then the killer ran off. And this guy came to him and told him what the situation was and got in his car. And the two of them chased him down after the killer had been shot by the man who showed up. Yeah.
There were two heroes that day. Those are the two heroes who stepped up, put themselves in harm's way, put their body, their life on the line without, just being asked, apparently, just coming to the call of God. Mr. Wilford apparently heard about this from his daughter, said there was people shooting at the church. And so he grabbed his gun and just went there. He didn't wait. He didn't stand around and go, well, what should I do? Should I call the police? Should I duck and cover? No, he went to stop the guy.
That's right. That's right. That's a real act of heroism right there. And fortunately,
truly is.
He was able to stop it. Didn't think twice. Was not at that church. As soon as he was told, he grabbed his rifle and went to stop it. And that's what the left wants to shut down. Our ability to be able to protect ourselves, because we can't know every crazy person everywhere. And people go off the rails, even though there have been warning signs typically for individuals. They do go off the rails. So are we going to be helpless and dependent on the police, who it takes a long time for them to get there, or are we going to be able to protect ourselves? That's the question. And that's what we're going to have to fight for. And that's something that people who are in soft targets, churches especially, as we said before, they're going to have to think about this. And they're going to need to take measures to protect themselves and to protect others.
Yeah, when seconds count, as they say, police are minutes away. And I mean, and this is just another, you look at the mainstream media that's lined up here. Lots of big cars, cameras, they're setting stuff up. We're running this on an iPhone right now. So we're a lot more nimbler. We can go to different locations. We were one of the few groups that were at the crash site last night because they weren't putting that out on any press releases of where it was. They were trying to keep that area locked down. And they actually had 4 different roads blocked off when we arrived there. So they were keeping that area locked. They didn't want people around. There was just one other news crew that had made it over there. But they weren't saying where the location was. We just kind of figured it out through different things that some of the law enforcement officials were saying.
Great work there. Did they say anything about how long this shooting went on?
From what I'm gathering, it was less than 5 minutes. So what they're saying is,
still, that's a tremendous amount of time when you got a guy walking around shooting people that are unarmed.
Oh, yeah.
He's got,
Exactly, and they believe he reloaded at least twice. So he went into the church, or shot from the back of the church, then went around to the right side of the church, and then he went inside. So he was actually outside for a majority of the shooting. Then he went inside and kept shooting, and then when he came out is when he was confronted by Mr. Wilford with a shotgun.
That's amazing. And we don't know at this point in time, we haven't had any confirmation that he did have a hostage, except for, and I guess the girlfriend of the guy who was driving the car with the two individuals who tracked him down. I guess she would know, but we don't know who that individual is that was taken hostage or why.
Correct. Not at this point. And it was interesting. It took a while for Stephen Wilford's name to come out.
Yes.
But Mr. Langendorf was giving interviews, and he's sort of, I wouldn't say soaked up the hero status, but he's been telling people what's been going on. So he has given a couple of news interviews, but we have not seen him this far.
And we're grateful for that. I mean, the problem is, as we typically see in a situation like this, the government comes in and tries to suppress all information, and the public wants to know. There's not a question as to whether or not there was somebody assisting him. The person that has been identified, tracked down, and killed by people who responded to the scene. That's over with. So we ought to be able to get that information from these people. So I'm grateful to the fact that the man who was driving the pursuit car, one of the two heroes, that he's been forthcoming and talking to people, and that his girlfriend is giving information out, because we can't get anything from the officials. They always put a gag on everything. So it's great that you're there, Rob, and it's super that you were able to track down that information, and you're going to be staying there for a while with updates, I assume.
That's correct. Right. In fact, as soon as we get done with your show, we're going to just go live on Facebook and do a long-form report of what we've been learning throughout the days here in Sutherland Springs, Texas.
Thank you very much. That's Rob Dew. He's in Sutherland Springs, Texas, and he will be having more reports on Infowars.com. We'll be right back. I'm David Knight.